I used to say my life ended at 52, the year I buried my husband. But if I'm honest with myself and with you, I don't think I actually started living until I turned 64. I remember standing there in the living room, one hand still resting on the old couch we bought in the late 90s, thinking, Elizabeth, what have you been holding yourself back from all these years? What did you quietly lock away? What did you deny? What did you deprive yourself of, and for what? Those questions didn't come like a thunderstorm. They arrived like a whisper, soft but relentless, sliding under my skin. Felt like a gentle scolding and a fresh awakening at the exact same time. And the strange thing is, it all started on a day that should have been completely ordinary. Oh, hi there. Didn't see you listening in already. I was just slipping back into that day. Let me start over properly so you can see the whole picture the way it really unfolded. The basement I kept avoiding. I was 64. A widow. 12 long years had gone by since my husband David passed away. You'd think after a decade of loneliness a person would get used to it. You don't. You just get used to functioning around it. It was a late morning, one of those slow, pale mornings where the sunlight doesn't quite commit to shining. I'd had my coffee, stared out the window longer than necessary, and then finally decided it was time. Time to face the monster. No, not a real monster. My basement. You know that one place in your house you just never go? The room, the closet, the drawer that somehow holds every unfinished thing inside you? For me, that was the basement. It was the place where I'd stuffed boxes when David died. The room I hurried through when I needed an old suitcase or a random tool. Place where memories, dust, and stale air all sat quietly together, waiting. Every time I thought about cleaning it, my chest would tighten just a little. So I avoided it. 4 years. But that morning I took a breath, told myself enough, and went downstairs. The light at the bottom of the steps was dim. The air held that faint, chalky smell of cardboard and time. Old paint cans in the corner. Stacks of boxes labeled in handwriting I recognized as my own from a younger, busier era. And then the oldest kind of label, none at all. Picked one random box. Just one. We'll start here, I whispered to myself like I was negotiating a peace treaty with my past. Tape peeled away with that dry tearing sound. Inside were books, some old receipts, a few faded holiday cards, and then something that stopped me cold. A photo album. Not the digital kind. Not a curated calendar collage. An actual thick album, heavy in my hands, smelling faintly like paper and sunblock. I sat down on an old wooden chair and opened it. The woman in the orange bikini. The first few pages were harmless enough. Family dinners, birthdays, blurry Christmas shots. But then I turned a page and there she was. Me. On a beach so many years ago it almost felt like it belonged to someone else. I was holding a margarita in one hand, a bright orange bikini wrapped around my body like it was the most natural thing in the world. My head was thrown back in laughter, hair loose and wild, shoulders sun-kissed. In that frozen moment there was no grief. No widowhood. No empty bed. No silence. Just a young Elizabeth laughing like the world adored her, and she believed it. I stared at that photo longer than I care to admit. Looking at it felt like someone had cracked open a door I'd nailed shut from the inside. Memories seeped out, warm, golden, reckless ones. But along with the warmth came a quiet ache. A sadness for a version of me I had buried without a funeral. Desires I'd neatly folded and packed away. Excitement, I told myself, was behind me now. All of it rushed back with that one smug orange bikini. And just as my chest tightened, as something deep inside me began to twist awake, I heard footsteps upstairs. Creak of the floorboards I knew too well. And then the hinge of the basement door. I tensed. It's funny how fast you can go from lost in a memory to who just walked into my house. I turned toward the staircase, and there he was, Ryan. Hey, he said, one hand raised in an easy half wave, the other holding a takeaway coffee. Surprise was written all over his face. The good kind of surprise. It was Ryan. I hadn't seen him in, what was it? 4 years? Maybe more. When I last saw him, he was 23. Thin, enthusiastic, always in motion. The young man standing in my basement doorway now looked different. Still Ryan, but older. Broader shoulders. More grounded. His dark hair was a little longer on top, his jawline a bit sharper. The same familiar smile, but surrounded by a presence that felt more settled. Confident. He was the son of my old neighbors, Lena and Mark. They'd moved away years ago, but when Ryan was a teenager, he'd mow our lawn, help David carry heavy things, fix things around the house when he wanted some extra cash. He'd practically grown up in and out of our yard. Surprise, he said more clearly, lifting the coffee cup slightly. Thought I'd just drop by. Didn't think I'd find you, dungeon diving. Ryan. I blinked, then laughed. When did you get here? Just now, he replied, stepping down the stairs. Saw your car out front, door was unlocked, so I let myself in. Hope that's okay. Of course, I said, genuinely happy to see him. It's been ages. He glanced around the basement with a quick scan, and then his eyes landed on the photo album in my hands. What's that? He asked, curiosity already pulling him closer. It's nothing, just. But before I could tuck the page away, his eyes dropped to that photo. The one of me in the orange bikini. Margarita. Laughing. Alive. For a second I froze. His gaze stayed on the picture longer than I was ready for. Then slowly he turned his head toward me. This is you. I let out a small, nervous laugh. Yeah. That's me. A long, long time ago. My loud phase. He looked back at the photo, then at me again. Something shifted in his expression, not disrespectful, not crude, just amazed. Genuinely stunned. Wow, he murmured, almost more to himself than to me. It's just weird picturing you like this. He smiled then, a soft, honest kind of smile that warmed his whole face. But it's impressive. You look really happy. If you're enjoying this little confession so far, stick with me. 'Cause trust me, this is only the beginning. The album opens more than just pictures. That flicker inside me, the one the orange bikini had ignited, didn't go away when Ryan walked in. If anything, it grew. Not because he was young. Not because he was handsome. But because of the way he looked at me in that moment. Not as the older lady next door he used to help with groceries. Not as the widow who wore cardigans and practical shoes. He looked at me like a woman. And it startled me how unfamiliar that felt. All right, I said abruptly, snapping the album shut. Enough of that trip down memory lane. I really do need to start hauling these boxes out of here. I started to close the cover fully, but Ryan reached out gently and touched my hand. Hang on, he said, half teasing, half serious. We have to see more of these. I mean, it's kind of incredible. I hesitated. Because here's the thing. Not every photo in that album was innocent. There were beach parties, sure. But there were also my college nights. Tight dresses. Dark clubs. Wild smiles. Parts of me even David never really understood. Part of me wanted to hide it all. To keep that younger version of myself a secret. But another part, a part that had been silent for 12 long years, wanted to be seen. All right, I said slowly, a small smile tugging at my lips. But be warned. Some of these might be a bit much. Ryan chuckled. I'm sure everything's fine, he said, sitting down on a nearby crate as if this was the most natural thing in the world. He took the album, resting it on his knees, and patted the space beside him. Come on, he said softly. Seed. Tell me who you used to be. That sentence. Tell me who you used to be. I don't think he realized how much that hit me. I sat beside him, close enough to feel the soft warmth of his shoulder through my sleeve, and together we opened the album again. We paged past the beach shots, the sun, the laughter, and then we landed on my early 20s. The woman I buried. One photo showed me in a tight, backless red dress. My hair pinned up, a mischievous smile on my face, caught mid-laugh on some nightclub dance floor. Colored lights blurred behind me. Ryan lingered on that one. This is really you? He asked, eyes widening slightly, darting between the photo and my current self. I felt my cheeks grow warm. Yeah, that's me. Things were different back then. Or maybe I was different. He didn't say anything right away. He just stared at that photo, absorbing it. Then slowly, he shook his head with a faint smile. You're incredible, he said quietly. I always knew you as, Mrs. Harper. The nice lady who gave me lemonade when I mowed the lawn. He glanced at the photo again, then back at me. But you were like this, full-on party girl. I laughed, actually laughed. A sound I hadn't heard from myself in that way for a long time. Party girl. I hadn't thought of myself that way in years. But seeing my reflection in his eyes, I couldn't deny it. There was a time when I chose fun, chose risk, chose myself. We kept flipping. There I was in a short pair of shorts and a bikini top, sand sticking to my legs, arm around a friend's shoulder. Another page. Me in a plunging black dress on a dance floor, eyes half closed, hair wild, body free. Ryan's expression softened. It's a privilege to see these, he said suddenly, almost formal in the way he meant it. Even when you were younger, your beauty was kind of breathtaking. David was a lucky man. His words warmed me like a glass of wine on an empty stomach. But they also stirred something else. Something I didn't have a name for yet. 'Cause here I was, sitting in a dusty basement, wearing an old house dress and slippers. And this man, grown now confident, was looking at me like I wasn't invisible. And I realized with a strange mix of wonder and sadness that I had never felt this scene. Not even with David. Quiet truth about David. David was a good man. People always said that, and they weren't wrong. He paid the bills on time. He never raised his voice. He was stable, reliable, predictable. But he was also distant. Cool. Calm lake with no ripples, no surprises, no storms. When I was younger, I didn't know how to name what was missing. I just knew that something inside me remained untouched. No matter what I wore, what I hinted at, what I needed. David always kept us carefully contained. Orderly. Appropriate. Sitting there in the basement, watching Ryan study my younger self in those photographs, I felt the contrast like a bruise. He flipped to the last page and then finally closed the album. But his eyes didn't move from me. Elizabeth, he said quietly, my first name sounding strange and intimate from his mouth. You're truly extraordinary. I blinked, swallowing around the lump forming in my throat. It had been so long since anyone had looked at me like that. So long since anyone had said something that landed in my chest instead of just bouncing off the surface. Our eyes met and held. And in that thick, dusty air of the basement, something shifted. The spark I didn't expect. Despite the chill of the concrete floor and the faint smell of old cardboard, a warmth spread through me. It started somewhere low and quiet and then rose slowly, insistently. I wasn't prepared for it. I'd thought that part of my life was done. filed away, buried, sealed. But sitting next to Ryan, feeling his quiet admiration and curiosity, I felt that buried version of myself stir. I wondered how many years I had spent trying to be small, trying to be appropriate, trying not to want too much. Ryan took a breath, as if steadying himself. "After seeing those pictures," he said, voice soft but firm, "I have to tell you, you haven't really aged, you know. Not in the way that matters." I tried to laugh it off, but my voice came out shaky. "That's kind of you, Ryan, but there's no hiding the fact that I'm older. Believe me, my knees tell me every morning." He shook his head. "No, I mean it. You still look young. And absolutely beautiful." The words hit me with unexpected force. Even when I was that girl in the orange bikini, I hadn't heard things like that very often. Not from the man I married, anyway. My heart beat faster. "Thank you," I said quietly. Then, after a pause, I added, more honestly than I expected, "Maybe I've gotten older, but I haven't lost touch with my desires. I've just gotten very good at hiding them." Ryan's eyes met mine and stayed there. "I can feel that," he replied. "You're not just beautiful. You're captivating." I felt myself blush under his gaze, which felt absurd at my age, and yet there I was, blushing like a teenager in a basement with a boy. Only he wasn't a boy anymore. And I knew it. The confession I didn't mean to make. There was a pause, the kind that feels heavy, like the air is listening. "It's strange hearing things like that from someone like you," I murmured, trying to deflect with a small smile. Then, because something inside me was loosening, I added, "David was nothing like you. He was always so calm, so controlled. He never really did anything to surprise me or excite me." Ryan tilted his head slightly, listening with a focus that made me feel like I was saying something sacred. "But not the kind of man you wanted, right?" he asked gently. I thought about looking away, but I didn't. "Right," I admitted. "I'm not saying he was a bad man. He wasn't. I just always felt like something was missing. Something alive. Something passionate." Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then he gave me a small, confident smile. "Maybe it's important you see that now," he said. "Maybe now's the time to figure out what actually fills that space. That void." His words lit a spark inside me I couldn't ignore. He wasn't flirting aimlessly. He wasn't playing games. He was seeing me, and gently nudging me toward myself. It was terrifying and exhilarating. The living room. Through a moment, Ryan stood up, sliding his hands into his pockets like he was grounding himself. "I'm going to go put my bike in the garage," he said, glancing toward the stairs. "Then I'll come right back. But don't stay down here. Wait for me in the living room, okay?" There was something in his tone, calm, confident, quietly insistent, that washed over me. "All right," I said softly. As he walked up the stairs, I found my eyes following him, noticing his steady stride, the way he carried himself. The boy who used to mow my lawn had grown into a man without asking my permission, and suddenly I was being confronted with that fact in high definition. I closed the album, slid it back into the box, and made my way upstairs. The living room felt familiar and unfamiliar at once. The same couch, the same coffee table, the same muted rug. But I felt different in it. I sat down, smoothing my dress over my knees, and waited. It wasn't long before I heard the front door open again. Ryan walked in carrying a bottle. The moment I saw the label, my breath caught. Rose. Not just any rose. My favorite rose. The one I used to buy on special occasions, even after David passed, just to remind myself I was still allowed to enjoy something. I looked up at him in surprise. I got this from the best place I could find, he said with a little smile. I hope you like it. Like it? I repeated, stunned. Ryan, this is my favorite wine. How did you know? He shrugged, looking suddenly a little shy. I notice things, he said. When I was younger, you always had a bottle of this in the fridge when you had people over. Igusi just remembered. The fact that he'd remembered such a small detail about me after all these years was more touching than I expected. Ryan, I said softly. That's incredibly thoughtful. Thank you. He opened the bottle with that unhurried care men sometimes use when they're trying not to lose their cool. He poured the blush-colored wine into 2 glasses and handed one to me. Then let's make some new memories tonight, Elizabeth, he said. I raised my glass, our fingers brushing lightly, and we toasted. To what exactly? I wasn't sure yet, but as the rose touched my tongue, its familiar taste blooming in my mouth, I felt something uncoil inside me. We began to talk. First about simple things, work, the neighborhood, what had changed over the years. Then about Lena and Mark, his parents, and where life had taken them. But as the wine slowly disappeared from the bottle, the conversation turned softer. Deeper. Closer. The gaze that wouldn't let go. At one point, I noticed our glasses were nearly empty. The room had grown dimmer, the afternoon sun sliding away. Ryan looked at me with a kind of focused warmth that made it hard to breathe properly. There was a pull in his gaze. A gravity. Inside me, a strange mixture of fear and excitement tugged at each other. He set his glass down on the table with deliberate care, like he was marking a moment. Elizabeth, he said quietly, his voice low but steady. My heart thudded. I could hear it in my ears. I swallowed. Yes, Ryan, I whispered. He reached out and took my hand in his, gently, as if offering me an exit at every second. His fingers were warm around mine, firm but not demanding. That touch alone sent a rush of feeling through me, feelings I had kept locked away for so long. I know I probably shouldn't say this, he began, eyes searching mine, but when I look at you now, I can't stop seeing the woman from that album. Not just how you looked, but how alive you were. He took a breath. You're not just incredibly beautiful, Elizabeth. You're more than I ever imagined you to be. His words echoed in places inside me I thought were closed for renovation. Places labeled "Do Not Enter." I felt my face flush, my hand trembling slightly in his. Ryan, I started, not even sure what I meant to say. But he held my gaze, steady and unwavering. In that moment, I felt like the room had shrunk to just the space between us. And for a heartbeat, I had absolutely no idea what would happen next. The kiss that changed everything and nothing. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was him, leaning a fraction closer. Maybe it was me, shifting without realizing it, drawn forward by a magnet I had spent years pretending didn't exist. Our faces were suddenly close enough that I could see the tiny flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Close enough that our breaths touched. For a second, I could have turned away, laughed it off, stood up and gone to wash the glasses. But instead, I stayed. And then, softly, he kissed me. It wasn't wild. It wasn't careless. It was slow, deliberate, almost reverent. His lips were warm against mine, and the world paused. All the years between who I had been and who I had allowed myself to become fell silent. All the losses, the routines, the quiet evenings alone, they blurred into the background. For one stolen moment, there was only this. A woman. A man. A basement full of memories upstairs, a bottle of rose half empty, and a kiss that felt like a door opening. My heart pounded so hard I thought he must be able to feel it through the space between us. But I didn't pull away. When he finally did, just for a second, the air between us crackled. I looked at him, searching his face for regret, uncertainty, apology, but found none. All I saw was honesty, and something that scared me because of how much I wanted it to be real. Driven by an impulse I hadn't felt in decades, I leaned in and kissed him back. This time it was my choice, my move, my answer. Kiss deepened but never lost its tenderness. His hand rose to the side of my face, thumb brushing my cheek with aching care, as if he were afraid I might vanish if he held on too tight. I fell awake, every nerve alive, every sense heightened. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I let myself be fully, completely present in a moment that was just for me. We didn't cross lines I can't describe here. This isn't a story of graphic confession. It's a story of rediscovery. We broke apart eventually, breathing a little harder, sitting a little closer. My heart felt like it had run a marathon without leaving the couch. My hands were trembling, though I tried to keep them still. Neither of us spoke for a while. There are some silences that aren't empty. They're full. Heavy with unspoken words, unasked questions, uncharted possibilities. This was one of them. The liberation no one saw coming. Even after the kisses, even after the way his hand had held mine, what happened most profoundly that night wasn't even visible. It happened inside me. We talked until the light outside faded completely and the room fell into a gentle, warm semi-darkness. We didn't need every detail laid bare. We didn't need promises or declarations. We talked about regrets, about choices, about getting older and realizing how many of your no's were just fear wearing a sensible coat. I found myself telling him things I had never said out loud. How I'd felt trapped in my own marriage without being able to justify it. How widowhood had felt strangely familiar, because I'd been lonely even before I was alone. How I'd always believed my wild self was something I'd forfeited forever when I said, I do. He listened. Really listened. Not with that polite, glazed patience people sometimes use with older women, but with full, attentive presence. At one point, I realized my shoulders didn't feel so tight. My jaw was no longer clenched. My body was at ease. Warm. Settled against the cushions next to his. We didn't need to prove anything by going further physically. The real revolution was in the fact that I had allowed myself to want again. Allowed myself to be wanted. Allowed myself to be seen as something other than a memory, a widow, a quiet figure in comfortable shoes. We sat in that living room for what felt like hours, just existing together in that fragile new space. And inside, something old fell away. All those years of telling myself, that part of your life is over, dissolved. All the rules I'd written for myself about age, about propriety, about what was appropriate for someone my age were quietly questioned. I didn't have all the answers. I still don't. But I knew this. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone else to decide whether I was allowed to feel alive. The late awakening. Later, when Ryan stood up, he ran a hand through his hair, giving me a small, breathless smile. I should probably take a shower and head home soon, he said. There was no disappointment in his voice. Just a kind of calm acceptance, like he understood exactly how big this night already was for me. I nodded, feeling the echo of our earlier conversation still humming through my body. Okay, I replied. Thank you for today. For the wine. For seeing me. He held my gaze for a moment longer. I'll always see you, Elizabeth, he said softly. Then he left the room, heading toward the guest bathroom down the hall, leaving me alone on the couch with my racing thoughts. I sank back into the cushions, feeling my heart still beating strong in my chest. For a long moment, I just stared at my hands, at the faint tremor in my fingers. I didn't truly live until now, I thought to myself. The realization landed with a strange, bittersweet weight. David, what did I let hold me back all these years? What did I deny myself because I was afraid to reach for more? It wasn't about blaming him. Not really. It was about finally being honest with myself about how much of my life I had lived on autopilot. How many versions of myself I had abandoned in favor of being good, proper, acceptable. That night didn't magically fix everything. Didn't rewrite my past. Didn't suddenly erase the loneliness of the last 12 years. But it did something quietly radical. It reminded me that I was still here. That my story hadn't ended at 52. That my reflection in the mirror wasn't a closing chapter, it was an ongoing sentence. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to write the rest of it my own way.